This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is awesome to have you along for the ride with us today. And before I introduce my incredible next guest and we talk about his technology platform for e-commerce and digital, I'd love to recommend that you go and you check out this podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. Wherever you get it, we are. Go ahead and subscribe and share if you could. We rely on you to get the word out about the podcast. We've got a back catalog of over 430 episodes for you to binge watch or listen to. So we would appreciate your help. We need the help with the algos. The more we get it shared and liked, the better we do. So really appreciate that. Now, I would love to welcome Raj Dedatta from Bloom to the podcast. Welcome, Raj.
Jason, it's great to be here with you.
It's amazing to have you with me today. And before we get into Bloomreach and the tech and the depth and the breadth of what the tech does and the value that it brings to merchants around the world, why don't you tell me, because you've been doing this for a long time, you've been doing this for almost 16 years, working in this space, this hot, up-and-coming e-commerce and omni-channel space. But what interested you in this in the first place? You're based in San Fran, absolute hotbed of big tech, small tech, medium tech, and everything in between, combined with absolutely a hotbed of e-commerce, digital solutions, etc. So it makes sense based on where your location is. But what was the big attraction for you?
Yeah, when I was thinking about what to do 15, 16 years ago, as you pointed out, I really believed we were in for a new wave of web infrastructure to get created. And we'd seen what had happened with Google, with Facebook at that time. And it just felt like what we had seen with Amazon was very early innings, and that commerce was going to explode and was going to be the basis for human interaction on the web. And so my perspective was, what could be a bigger problem to challenge than making sure that all of us who are increasingly going to live our lives digitally have the highest quality interactions digitally that we wish for physically in our personal lives. And so how could we create that kind of internet? And that was the mission statement of getting started. And of course, that took me into e-commerce and data and AI and all the topics that I'm sure we'll get to here. But that's what got me excited to get into this world.
I love it. And were you, at that time, were you scratching an itch, meaning were you working in retail? Were you working in e-commerce? Were you working in digital? Did you have a brand? Were you trying to set up a store? Was this very much a scratching an itch scenario, or more of, hey, I see a gap in the market that isn't really being filled yet, and I think we can build something to fill that gap?
Yeah, I was really a data and computer science kind of guy. I didn't come from retail. I didn't come from brands, but I came from the tech. I had gotten my degree in signal processing and electrical engineering. I'd worked in networking device companies. So I was an engineer and product person at heart. And I just came to observe through my research that as people were building websites back 15, 16 years ago, they were basically doing it manually. And I just thought, there's got to be a better way. We got to be able to apply data and data science to this problem, because I can't imagine how, if you're building a website to serve thousands of people, you can figure out exactly what to show each of those 1,000 people manually. You needed data science, algorithms, and ultimately AI to the rescue. And so I got very excited about this problem. Of course, e-commerce was the ultimate example of this, where I've got hundreds of thousands of customers, lots of products. How do I know what to show you? And I just thought my tool set might be useful here.
Makes complete sense. And we see this quite often, that people that are technical in nature, or maybe they're a designer at heart, or maybe they're a salesperson at heart, or they've got these different skill sets. And when they take aim at our industry through their unique lens and their unique skill set, it brings a new spin to things. It brings a new angle to things. And it can often help the industry to see itself through a different lens. And therefore, we can come up with novel solutions that maybe haven't been thought of before, because we're looking at it in a different way, or we're approaching the challenge or approaching the problem in a different way. So therefore, come up with a different solution than perhaps anyone else could or would. Now, if we think about what Bloomreach is, as I understand it, in full transparency, I've never worked with the Bloomreach platform before. We look at search, merch, personalization, automation. It's 4 modules in one, so to speak. Now, what's interesting about that, first of all, am I understanding what the holistic picture of the platform is?
That's right. I think the way we think about it is that it spans all the marketing interactions to start with, which is the beginning of the customer journey, which we can think of as how do you get exposed to a brand through email, through SMS, through an ad, through an app. So those are the early part of the funnel. And then you've got the latter part of the funnel, which is, all right, now I'm interested in this brand. Where will I go next? I'll go to the content. So we have a content capability. And then finally, when I'm interested in the products, I'm going to search, I'm going to browse, I'm going to click on recommendations. I'm going to go through the navigation structure to find the product that best meets my needs. And we play there too. So effectively, we follow the customer through their shopping journey.
And look, what's interesting about this, and I'd love your take on this, is that even as little as 5 to 10 years ago, these were oftentimes very different components and different solutions as point solutions for specific points in the customer journey. So we had the dedicated marketing automation and CDP platforms. We had the dedicated merchandising, enterprise search, whatever you want to call them,
Yes.
platforms. We had the dedicated merchandising platforms where we could merchandise products within categories. We could merchandise through dynamic menuing. We could do that. And then we had dedicated personalization platforms where
Yes.
we're going to show the right content and the right products at the right time that is hopefully going to, using wisdom of the crowd, we're going to present the right stuff that is likely to be of interest to the browser so that they actually want to add those products to their cart and check out. And so this is the inspiration part of the journey, so to speak. And that usually took the form of product and or content recommendations.
Exactly.
Sometimes those would live on a category page, the PDP, the cart, different placements throughout a website. And so these have historically, and we think of other platforms, Nosto and a whole bunch of other platforms that have played in this space for a very long time, but they historically have been like separate modules, separate pieces of technology from separate vendors. And I never understood that because, as you rightly pointed out, every piece of that journey has to inform the other. So in other words, if I'm searching for something and those results don't result in me adding it to a cart, that's a piece of information that I can then use to further personalize the journey. Or if I do add it to the cart, that's a piece of information I need to personalize the journey. If I add it to the cart, but then I abandon the cart and I don't make the purchase, that's a piece of information I need to inform the journey. And I need to track every page that I visit on the website and every interaction I have with a piece of product, or a piece of content. I need to be able to understand what that looks like in terms of behavior so that I can then inform the other parts of the journey. And so we were always able to do this to a degree through custom integration of these tools via APIs and sending data and sharing data, but it was a nightmare. It was, and I know because I had to architect these types of integrations in the past. And it was just, it felt like a nightmare because all of these different platforms typically had different data models and to different behavioral models. And so there was never a one-to-one match or never a one-to-one mapping between these tools. So even if you wanted to share data between them, it was very difficult to do so in a meaningful way to unify the experience or unify the journey. And so what we've seen is a massive consolidation over the last 5 to 10 years where we've seen mergers, acquisition, attrition, where a lot of these tools, Monetate, and a whole bunch of different tools have been bought up and integrated into sort of a core solution. So was it always your view, even back in the day, to say, look, it does us no good to only understand one tiny little sliver of the journey. We actually always need to understand the full journey.
Look, Jason, you have really put your finger on the core issue in my mind and the inspiration behind Bloomreach, because I would even go so far as to say personalization, which, consumers have voted very clearly for. There's lots of data to support that. Just simply the industry has failed to deliver it to those consumers. We don't need to do anything more than open our email inboxes and look at how few emails are personalized, and then click through from those emails and go to the website and see how few of those websites understand the email message that we came from, to understand that personalization has been a grand failed experiment, ultimately. And it's because of exactly what you said. The incredible amount of siloing basically means the data is trapped in each one of these things. So the data is in your email system, in your SMS system, in your website system, in your recommendation tool, in your search engine. It's never joined up. And the process of bringing it together is way too complicated. And then somebody had the bright idea of saying, let's go invent CDP. And so they said, let's put a customer data platform, but which is yet another tool to then go add into all of this stuff to stitch it together. So from a Bloomreach perspective, we believe that mergers and acquisitions are actually not the solve for this. The solve for this is a single underlying platform that is data native, that knows you as the customer, knows every product in the world, then builds models, and then connects all those channels natively into each of these. So you as the brand don't have to build the spaghetti mess of integrations. You just turn on your email system and automatically it's powered by the customer data. And then you turn on SMS and it's, oh, the SMS understood what was in the email. And then you turn on the website or the recommendations or the search, and it's all drawing from the same engine automatically. And now you have a joined up experience.
Yeah, and so was those core modules that you have today, did you launch with all of those modules, or did you add with those? What did it just start as a pure search platform?
Yes, it
Start?
exactly. It started with SEO and search, and then we added merchandising, and then we added content, and then we added recommendations, and then we added email, and then we added SMS, and then we added apps, and then we added ad targeting, and then we've recently added conversational. So I often tell people our roadmap just follows how people shop.
And I guess as people's expectations have evolved over the years, so has your technology had to evolve, meaning the channel proliferation has gotten insane. The sources of traffic have gotten insane. There's massive diffusion there. They're shopping and they're arriving. They're shopping at marketplaces. They're coming in via social platforms. They're coming in via influencer media. They're coming in through a YouTube video. And I understand that you're not necessarily an attribution platform. You're not trying to be a North Beam. You're not trying to be a triple whale. I get that. However, it is fruitful to understand that customers enter our business from different points. They don't always just come to our homepage. They don't always just come to a category page or PDP. They don't necessarily come just from email. They're coming from multiple different sources, and where they ultimately arrive at our digital properties is an indicator of even if we don't know exactly where they came from down to the URL, we can have a reasonably good idea of what their expectation was when they landed on a specific page on our website. And then we can start personalizing immediately from there.
I think there's great signal that comes from where they came from, what campaign, what ad network, what marketplace. There's also great signal that comes from the fact that increasingly we are able to identify who they are and look at what product they bought last, look at what their demographic might contain, look at what their payments might have contained. So the richness of information that's available in real time to then make a decision about what to present you is growing. And so is the sophistication of the models that are making those decisions. And so I think it's an interesting time to build a composite understanding of who you are and increasingly give you a more and more relevant experience progressively as you traverse the buying journey.
And how do you guys think about the tension between hyper personalization, surprise and delight, and aspirational product discovery? Because I think there's all three components have to be present, right? Obviously, if I come to a website, who I am, I'm a man, for example, and I've historically bought maybe jeans with you. I've bought 85% of my purchases are black in color, the attributes of all the products I've purchased, that I'm a size 30 inseam or whatever it is, all the attributes of the products that I've purchased from you before. So you have a pretty good idea, geez, if he buys black things 85% of the time, well, it's probably a pretty good idea that he probably likes the color black, or she likes the color red, or whatever it might be. But we have this tension whereby I'm not always shopping just for me when I go to a website. Sometimes I'm shopping for me. Sometimes I'm shopping for a gift. Sometimes I'm shopping for a family member, whatever it might be. And then we also have the fact that if we hyper-personalize too far, then all of a sudden we're not necessarily exposing some of the surprise and delight and aspirational stuff and some of the inspirational stuff that we might want to show them from our new ranges or something like that we don't know yet that they might like those things. So we need to mix it up to a degree. And if we hyper personalize too much, then maybe it doesn't fulfill those other needs that we sometimes have when we're shopping on a website. So I feel like there's a little bit of tension there, where the idea always was We want to hyper personalize. We want it to be almost like we have a crystal ball that if we present this thing to this person, then it's got like an 85% chance of converting them. But I think there's almost an over personalization risk just as much as an under personalization risk in some regards. How do you guys deal with that kind of tension?
It's a great question and a hard question. It's not an easy thing to get right at scale. Of course, a human being making these judgment calls can make a determination, but when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of real-time sessions, you're having to make in millisecond choices. Now, what I will say is that there's a few things that influence that. The first is context. So that it's a very different thing to be on the product detail page interacting and what do you show there versus upper funnel early in the interaction in a ad unit on a homepage, earlier in the funnel. So context matters. I think that can help. Sometimes users give us expressions of intent through what they do. I was just discussing with our chief product officer that if somebody goes into a search bar and types in Halloween, it's pretty clear they're very open-ended. Are they looking for Halloween candy or a Halloween costume? You don't even know. So you might be better placed to provide options and see where the journey takes the user. Whereas if somebody is going in and saying Alice in Wonderland costumes for a Halloween party for 8-year-old, maybe not so experimental at that point, give them what they're looking for. So sometimes users tell us through their search, through their browse, through their interactions, what they care about. And the last thing I'll say is data often answers these questions. You can be wrong the first time, but with enough sample size, the data tells us based on an interaction pattern, based on the context, based on the user, what should we likely do in this situation that works? And we can follow that logic through the journey.
So we're stacking the deck in the merchant's favor in the best way that we can to give us the best odds of presenting the right thing at the right time to the right customer.
That's right. That's right. And I will say one of our observations, and in fact, I wrote a book called The Digital Seeker. And the thesis of the book is that people aren't shopping for products or solutions or SKUs. People are shopping to solve problems. And that often if you build the digital experience for what people seek rather than what they tell you they're going to buy, you actually do better all around. And that's the result of the research. The trouble has been, it's very difficult to build websites, e-commerce stores, e-commerce interactions for what people seek. Because how do you know what they seek? They don't often tell you. We're used to reading these 5-word keywords or watching their browse patterns. And so increasingly, I think with AI, that's the uncharted waters, is to go even further up the funnel into the mind of the customer and present them with experiences that anticipate their needs and present them with solutions that then meet those needs.
Yeah, and look, it's a really interesting one because I've been doing this for 24 years, and the paradigm of home category, PDP, checkout success page, SRPs, that paradigm, that model hasn't really changed at all in my time. And I wonder if and when we're going to get to a point where AI is good enough that we can have an option for the customer to say, okay, cool, I can either navigate your site through the traditional way where I've got categories and I've got a search bar and I've got this traditional paradigm of home, category, cart, checkout, whatever, or I can just start on the homepage of a website with a conversational search bar, exactly like I was going to Google, where I converse with an agent, like I do when I go into a physical store, and I have effectively a concierge type of service. Oh, Mr., Mrs., what are you looking for today? Are you buying for a friend? Are you buying for yourself? Are you buying for a special event or an activity or a season? I liken it to when I go into a jewelry store, for example. The person behind the counter never just grabs 5 things out of the shelf and just plunks it on the table. The first thing they start asking me is, are you here shopping for yourself or for someone else? Do you have a preference of gold, silver, platinum? Do you have a favorite gemstone? They ask you 20 questions of all different varieties to qualify you. Then, and only then, do they pick 2, 3, 4, 5 items out of the shelf that they think matches what they think you would like based on the questions and answers that you've given. And then they've filtered that for you before they even show you anything at all. And I almost feel like that's what a good AI agent would be able to do digitally, where I can just literally say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have anything like this? And then it can show a curated, it's basically an AI layer over what your normal SRPs would be anyway, but it's a conversational layer over the top of that.
I love that articulation, and it is exactly that belief that led us to build a product called Clarity. And so we built a product called Clarity that released last year, and it's in early, I would say it's got its first 10 brands on it. And it does exactly what you said. It is a conversational agent that allows you to interact with a expert, almost like your best salesperson in the store. And it behaves exactly like that. It doesn't just show up and lay out all the products. It asks you some questions. It figures out where you are in the journey. It guides you along the way. It actually is connected to your historical data so that it knows what you bought last week. It can show up this week with a thing that might be relevant to that. So it's exactly that. And you're right. If you use it, you can almost traverse the entire website without ever visiting a category page, a search page, a PDP, or any other page. You're just interacting with an agent that is leading you down the path of purchase. And
Right.
we've seen it work incredibly well. It's fully trained for shopping, which is different than the typical customer service agent that might be out there, which is trained for customer service. And it turns out that it's an incredibly effective way, especially for more considered purchases, to navigate you down the buying journey.
And is that so? Someone types into a chat box with an agent?
Yeah, it actually happens in many different ways. It can be user initiated or brand initiated. So, yes, you can just chat with it, but it might also watch what you're doing and pop up and say, hey, looks like you're looking at this particular product. We have a new one in stock. Have you considered that? So, it's also considering your interactions. And then we've had people have very different UI treatments. We've had people put big buttons like I'm the style expert on the product detail page if you're looking for somebody to work with your style. We've had people do it further up the funnel in the grid. Ask, as you type a query, it might ask you some questions back rather than requiring you to filter. So our view is that conversational is super powerful and potentially present across the digital experience. And just as you said, people don't necessarily enter the website in the same way all the time. People don't necessarily enter the conversation in the same way all the time.
That's true. And this is text chat, not voice chat, correct?
It's mostly manifested as text chat. Now, it wouldn't be hard for it to be voice chat because
Sure.
text to speech is well understood. But what we find, practically speaking, is it's really interacted with through the same native mechanisms that a website today presents its shopping experience, which is typically some kind of text or swipe or other such interface. But I don't think it would be a far cry for that to be mobile voice.
Yeah, I think we're so far, my interaction with LLMs and the interfaces on top of them, voice interactions are not quite there yet. I think they're getting there. I think that refining, becoming a prompt engineer, which back in the day would have just been called being an expert Googler, but becoming a prompt engineer, I think that refining prompts and things like that, they're very much predicated on the idea of it being a text written prompt. And so I just haven't been that wowed yet with literal voice conversational interactions. I think the AI has a ways to go to get there. But to your point, I think the underlying data set in terms of the products, the knowledge about the customer, their demographics, their purchasing history, all their other behavioral interaction that you've been tracking over time. Obviously, that is the underpinnings. It's the classic case of garbage in, garbage out, right? First of all, we got to be collecting the data. We got to be collecting it in the right way. We got to be organizing it in the right way. And then we have to surface it in a meaningful way to enrich the customer experience. And if you miss out any one of those steps, it's going to lead to a pretty crap experience, right?
Absolutely. And it turns out that as we've used these underlying LLM models from great partners like Google and NVIDIA, there's a lot of systems engineering work that is required to actually make them work, to make them performant, to make them adopt to guardrails, to handle all the content inputs, to make sure the conversational tone works, to make sure that there's precision and accuracy to the product information that's presented. So there's a lot of things that have to be figured out. And what we've seen is, however, it is a very different paradigm. And whereas a year ago, I would have said, this is experimental. Now I can tell you the proof points are pretty compelling.
Wow, amazing. And let's shift gears for just a moment here and let's talk B2B because that's what's near and dear to my heart. That's what I've been specializing in for the last 4 years very deeply. B2B, especially in the context of search, merchandising, personalization, it's quite a different beast. Yes, there
Yeah.
are certain things that are the same, but we need most of your typical retail focused platforms around this. They are just not designed to handle the catalog complexity and breadth and depth of B2B catalogs. They tend to be orders of magnitude larger than your typical B2C, D2C catalog. Products tend to be infinitely more complex. They tend to have lots of specs, and there are things in terms of compliance and all sorts of other things, and application data, cross-referencing data that's really important to be able to recommend the right product for the right use case on a building site, for example, or if it's an electrical component or something like that. There's got to be certifications, and there's got to be exploded drawings, and all. It's quite a different world. And then we have the added complication of the fact that in the B2B world, instead of price being an attribute of the product, it's an attribute of the customer. So we want to
Yeah.
make sure that we're showing them the products that they should have access to if they've got a restricted catalog. We're showing them the pricing that they should have access to, and we're personalizing at both the account level and the individual user level, because we're selling into accounts in the B2B world. We're not selling to individuals. And so there's a whole lot more data that comes into this world when we're thinking about supporting the traditional B2B buyer use cases. And it is infinitely more complex, and there's a lot more we have to consider in that user journey, that if the platform isn't designed with those things in mind, it means that it's almost impossible to orient that platform around those use cases.
Yeah, look, I think what you described about B2B, I couldn't agree with you more. We have a number of large B2B customers, people like Staples that sell office supplies, and folks that sell to restaurants, and folks that sell parts to automobiles. It has all the attributes you're describing. It's account driven, it's custom catalogs, it's custom pricing, it's custom SKUs sometimes. And I think it has to work completely differently. And so, specifically in our search business, we have built B2B search. So it handles all those capabilities. So if you're searching, a lot of the reasons why those B2B customers prefer us is that it will natively handle all those cases. It will make sure that you only get the products you're authorized to get at the prices you're authorized to get them, that the personalization is at the level of an organization or even a vertical. We have folks who say, I have hospitality customers and government customers. Personalize at that level. Don't personalize at the individual level. And you can do that. So totally agree with you that B2B personalization is a thing unto itself. And while it's all commerce and while it's at some level all personalization, the details are pretty different.
They are. And was that something that, again, you arrived at laterally and said, geez, okay, we've got this amazing platform. It does retail really well. It does the traditional retail consumer journey really well. But if we want to do this B2B thing, you can't do it halfway. You have to say, we're going to go all in on this, or we're not going to do it at all, because
That's
you can't halfway do it. There's just so much complexity there, and the amount of dev time and resource and scoping and product development you need to do to be able to be a really amazing tool for B2Bs. It's just a totally different ball game. And so I'm guessing that at some point you said, cool, we've got this retail thing nailed. Now, do we really want to take on this B2B thing? And what would that look like if we did?
That's right. And we bounded it because B2B is a very big space that can mean everything from aircraft manufacturers to selling office supplies, and they're not the same thing. And
Totally.
so what we said was, let's focus on the part of B2B that feels like B2C. It's got lots of SKUs, lots of products, the need for lots of consumers. So it might be small businesses, they might be selling in a B2C like manner, but honoring B2B principles. And that's where we focused. And we focused specifically on powering kind of the web shopping experience for them. We didn't do a lot on the marketing side where you have
I was going to ask, that was going to be my next question, because that gets into a whole nother world as well.
That's right. That's right. So I would say we're early in the B2B journey where, our web e-commerce capabilities are very rich. We haven't yet targeted marketing, and we're focused on the B2B businesses that feel like B2C a little bit in terms of what they're selling.
And if I came to you today and I've never worked with you before, it's a from scratch implementation, I'm guessing that it's got an implementation component. I'm guessing that in some cases you might have some out-of-the-box connectors with popular e-commerce platforms, for example. Then I'm guessing you're a full API-based platform. So if there needs to be a custom implementation, then that can be done by, I'm guessing, either you and or SIs that maybe specialize in your platform. And then, as you pointed out, not every module is necessarily going to be appropriate for every single merchant or seller. And so therefore, I guess it comes down to, okay, what do you need? What can you make use of from our suite of tools? And then we're going to price that based on, I'm guessing, modules, maybe some element of usage of your SaaS platform. So kind of how do you service your customers? How do you normally go into scoping with them? How do you normally go into implementations with them? What does that normally look like?
So I think you've pretty much covered the gamut of cases. But if I were to segment, we have a number of mid-sized brands, many of them on Shopify or Magento, that we have an existing connector for, that often want the fullness of this customer experience, end-to-end personalization, email, SMS, but also the website. And they will just largely turn it on. We have agencies that are Shopify agencies, for example, that will make it all work and will be able to deliver rich personalization that is an upgrade on what you might have started with. Maybe you're 20, 30, $40 million of online GMV. You want these more sophisticated personalization flows, but you don't want to spend an arm and a leg. You want time to value to be quick. You want to stand it up quickly. There's a solution for that. And then on the other side, we work with multi-billion-dollar companies where they have complex environments and where the API model makes sense, where they're picking one individual application like just search or just email. They still want the data-driven platform. They like the coherence of the end-to-end story and the data-driven personalization across all touch points, but they want to start by generating ROI in one place first, replacing one system, and then gradually exploring rolling out the others. And we have both those cases. We have our own teams that can step in and help implementation, but we also have a rich fabric of partners that can help stand folks up. And then, yes, the theory is that it's a modular platform, much the way GCP or AWS are API-based platforms. We think that the world of ripping and replacing entire platforms is behind us, and that the modularity should be a feature of the platform. And so we believe in that, so much so that we think you should be realizing ROI on your initial purchases, seeing better conversion rates, better lifetime value, better marketing performance first, and then rolling out more and more capabilities to compound your ROI in that process.
And how, I don't expect you to be, down to the button specific, but what would, I don't know, let's say I'm a $30 million a year Shopify merchant and I want the whole suite that plugs natively into Shopify. I'm getting 500,000 visitors a month to the website. What kind of ballpark would I be expecting to pay in this kind of environment if I'm
Yeah, so I think the way we price is exactly what you said. It's which modules do you want, and what's the consumption? How many either events, emails, SMSs, website traffic are you putting into the platform? And that is what causes it to scale. And I would say we have, maybe to just give you the range, on the lower end, some of our up and coming merchants, they might get started at 40, 50K and get going for a year. And then it will scale up from there depending on your size, your consumption, and your module utilization, all the way to millions.
Sky's the limit. Yep.
And we have everything in the middle of that spectrum.
Yep.
I would say it's not well suited for the SMB
Yes.
that is just getting started.
It's an enterprise. It's
a mid-market and enterprise platform where I'm outgrowing Klaviyo. I want the next step. Great. All the way up to I'm running a multi-billion-dollar business. I'm betting it on personalization, and I want to operate at enterprise, multi-brand, multi-geography scale.
Yep, that makes sense. It really starts to make sense if you're doing probably 10 million bucks in GMV or more a year. It's probably starting to make some pretty serious sense for you.
Some economic sense. That's right.
Yep, makes sense to me too. What would you say if we were to look out 12, 18, 24 months from now? Is there anything your customers are asking for you don't do yet? Or are you looking on the horizon and saying, we don't do this, but we think in 12 months we will be doing this, and we think this is the next big market opportunity for us? What's high on your priority list? What's top of your radar right now?
So I think when we've been running these events called Edge Summit, where we've been launching, our AI-powered innovation, and that's at the heart of everything that we're thinking about. We're certainly getting input from customers about the kind of problems they want to solve, and then picking from those classes of problems to determine what ultimately would be most consequential on the top line and bottom line of our customers. And so we apply that test. One of the ones that we just announced a month ago is completely revamping marketing automation. And that's coming next year. And what we plan to do there is remove the paradigm of I go specify an audience, figure out the campaign, do the creative, build the flows, touch all the channels, write the copy, execute the campaign, test it out. Like, we feel like the future is I want the best reactivation campaign that is going to move lapsed customers into ongoing customers at the following rate. And the system can go figure out what to go do to make that happen. So when you start to engineer these systems with native models that are informed by our corpus of 25% of e-commerce is powered by Bloomreach. So we have a lot of flows. We can learn from that data and we can give people the answer without them having to go through the manual process of figuring this all out. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think it's gonna transform the way we think about marketing.
And what do you think is the future of marketing around dynamic collateral creation that is targeted and personalized? Because I still see that in my inbox, I'm still routinely getting what appear to be completely non-targeted emails from retailers. It feels still very much batch and blast. Maybe sometimes, maybe there's a product panel that may be a little bit personalized to me based on my previous purchasing, but all the creative, the banner images, all that sort of stuff, oftentimes it's, I don't know, they might be advertising women's products to me when they know I'm a man and I've only ever bought men's products. And I think in some respects, it's not that they don't want to personalize that. It's that the scale of creative, especially if they're sending an email a day or they're sending 3 or 4 emails a week, the scale of custom creative that they would need to make for those small segments of customers to make everything in the email personalized to where it was really hyper relevant. They just don't have the design capability at scale to be able to create all those unique pieces of collateral to highly personalize the entire email journey or the SMS journey, for example. And I feel like that should be a place where AI could, because they've already got the product images in the catalog, right? They've oftentimes got product videos in the catalog. They've got the attributes. They got the long descriptions, the structured data, the unstructured data. They got all this stuff. So if I was to pump, for example, even using something as simple as the Windows Copilot, which I use to generate images for me all the time for my podcast. I tell it what I want and it generates the image. And it doesn't even have access to my product catalog to do that, or it doesn't have access to a catalog to base those images on. Now, if we could plug a Copilot into that builder, the collateral builder or the segment builder, and we could dynamically create the creative that was relevant to that customer so that the entire email flow was more personalized, it feels like the technology is either there or very close to being there to where we don't need a designer to design every single piece of collateral we put into an email.
I totally agree. I think where we are with AI on creative generation is, and this is the kind of thing that Bloomreach enables today. Base creatives are still being, generated the way they've been historically been generated. And then variant generation is being done by machines. But you can do a lot with that. If you have the base imagery for 3, 4, 5 segments across, you can then take that and explode that into thousands of variants that can be one-to-one. And that's where I think the business and the market and the tech is today. As time goes on, you can ask the question, could base creatives themselves be dynamically generated with AI? And maybe one day they will be, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Super interesting, because it does feel like despite the cutting edge tech, some retailers are just really still struggling. They might have the ability to segment, but treating those segments differently is still hard for them, because being able to craft the campaign, being able to craft the message, being able to craft the collateral and the imagery and the videos and all that stuff for those individual segments is still very hard and very time consuming for most of these retailers. So it feels like we're just on the cusp of being able to do some of that stuff at scale.
Makes sense.
Amazing.
Totally.
And if people want to get a hold of you, I'm happy to drop, obviously, your LinkedIn profile link. I'll drop that in the show notes. I'll drop the Bloomreach link in the show notes. If people want to get a hold of you and they want to learn more, they want to talk to you more about personalization, search, merchandising, customer experience, customer journey building, what's the best way to get a hold of you and have those conversations?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably a great starting point. Good to message me there or find me there or DM me there, and we'll take the conversation forward. And yeah, excited to have all these conversations on this rich set of topics.
Love it. Listen, now as we come down to the end of our time together, it's been a really good conversation. We've covered a lot of territory in just under an hour here. This is the point of the conversation where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question. Any question you like, could be personal or professional. So, Raj from Bloomreach, what is your question for me today?
So my question for you is, what's the most innovative thing you have seen in e-commerce in the last, let's call it, year?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I've got to be honest with you. Especially because I now work so heavily in the B2B world, B2B is still probably 5 to 10 years behind their B2C and D2C counterparts. And so most B2B sellers are still really early in their journey. They're still really early in their digital transformation journey, etc. So look, I don't think anybody is doing anything crazily groundbreaking. And to be honest, even as a retail consumer, and I buy more online than most your typical consumer would. I'm like 90% shopping online. I actually don't enjoy physical shopping. So if I have the chance to buy something online instead of going into a physical store for it, I'll take that digital experience every single time, no matter how good or bad it is. I'll try to stick with it and see it out to the end. There's still some areas where most brands aren't even at the basic level of an Amazon type of trust level. And I think it comes down to even things like delivery targets and delivery dates not being accurate at all, or not even providing a target delivery date for a product like Amazon does, and then they'll update it if there's delays or things like that. I think there's really just still some basic trust tick boxes that a lot of retailers just are not thinking about. They're thinking about much more advanced, much more complex stuff than that. When if they got back to basics and they said, look, let's make sure that our shipping estimates are right. Let's make sure that our shipping target times are right. Let's make sure that our inventory counts are right. I still see stuff like that all the time where I shop online and then I place an order and then they message me or they have to ring me and they say, oh, sorry, that thing that we said we had in stock, we actually don't have that in stock. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to back order it, or do you want us to just remove it from the order? I still get that all the time. And so I think there's some operational fundamentals that a lot of brands just haven't focused on because they're so focused on the UX, UI, and the shiny new things that getting the absolute bare bones basics right that would generate absolute and total trust in the brand. This is a really boring answer. I know this is not the answer you wanted to hear, and it's not the answer I actually wanted to give, but it's something that I'm still seeing on a regular basis. And then the other thing I'm not seeing is proactive outreach that isn't automated, meaning that I have yet, even if I've spent thousands of dollars with a retailer, I have, in my 24 years of being in this industry and like 15 years as being a hardcore online consumer, I have yet to have a single retailer call me up just to have a conversation unless there's a problem with my order. Yep. So in other words, just ringing me up and saying, oh, hey, so when I think of almost like a reactivation campaign, I'm thinking along the lines of, okay, I was buying routinely from this brand every single month in, month out for a year, say, and then all of a sudden I stopped buying through them. Even in scenarios like that, I've never got a phone call to say, hey, we saw that you were a loyal customer of ours. You've bought a lot of things through us. We really appreciate your business, but we noticed you haven't placed an order in 6 months, and that's quite a change in your buying patterns with us. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about that and what happened, or did we do something wrong, or did you move out of the country? Or I just feel like a lot of brands could actually start scaling some of the unscalable things, and it would actually have much more impact than just simply saying we can send more emails, more personalized emails that are all push. They're not conversational, two-way conversational communications. They're all push. And I still think that brands get that wrong more than they get it right. And I don't quite understand why.
Those are
Because I
great
tell you,
observations. Makes
in the
sense. Like,
B2B world, it's normal for the sales reps to regularly be on the phone with their customers. But this kind of thing just does not happen in the B2C and D2C world. And I think it's disappointing.
yeah, I think you're observing the let's add humanity back into commerce perspective, which I fully resonate with. So thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure. Listen, this is super enlightening for me. It's been super fun, super enjoyable, and to walk down memory lane of how Bloomreach came to be and what its priorities are and what's next for you guys. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.